Muller. I'm one of the editors at Rae Books who works on the Star Wars novels, and today, originally I thought we were going to be talking about cats and kittens and book interns and stuff. Apparently I was told we have to talk about Star Wars. So I know. But what's awesome is we get to hang out today and talk about Star Wars with one of the coolest people that I've ever met, never had a chance to work with, the wonderful and awesome Rae Carson. One of the fantastic things she's written in her career, she wrote for us a short story in a book called From a Certain Point of View a couple years ago called The Red One, where she broke all of our hearts writing about the wonderful.
You say the nicest things.
Red droid, Skippy. And then she wrote a short story for us in Canto Bight Anthology, which was a really amazing story about a parent and their child and the trials and tribulations that one is willing to go through in order to protect the other, set in Canto Bight just before The Last Jedi. And then you got to write an awesome book called Star Wars Most Wanted. It's about Han and Kira, set before the Solo film, which is an amazing entry into those two characters. If you haven't had a chance to check that book out yet, you definitely should. And then you just recently wrote a little book called Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, the novelization, which, in case you haven't heard the news, we actually secretly put on sale early here at C2E2. Now, before you go running out of the room, don't go running out of the room. It is available. I will tell you where it's available, and you can make your plans for later. So it is available at booth 621, which is the Del Rey booth. It's also available at the Andersons booth, which I don't know the exact number, but it's right around 1040. If you head down to the 1000 aisle, they're right in the middle there, you can see the booth. But after this panel, at about 3:15, don't worry, we will end in plenty of time for everyone to make their way down there, so don't feel the need to rush. At 3:15, we will be downstairs at the autographing area, table number 3. They should have copies of The Rise of Skywalker there for you to purchase. They're going to be happy to sign. So you all get a chance to read The Rise of Skywalker a few weeks early because its actual release date is March 7th. So for all of you, we brought the book early as a nice little surprise for coming to Chicago. We appreciate it. So before we talk to Rae, and we're going to dive into all sorts of stuff about The Rise of Skywalker and talk about writing Star Wars and all that, I just wanted to go through a very quick, 3-slide thing about some of the books that are coming out this year. I'm not about to break any news. There's not a new announcement, but you guys may have heard, maybe there was an announcement earlier this week. You might have heard about. There's also been a little schedule shuffling, so I said, you know what, let's take 2 minutes, let's get ourselves all situated, and then we'll talk about Rise of Skywalker. So, coming up after The Rise of Skywalker, our next full novel that's coming is Star Wars Shadows of Fall, which is the second book in the Alphabet Squadron trilogy that Alexander Freed started last year. Here's the awesome, beautiful cover that we could basically spend 2 hours staring at. It's on sale in June. If you read Alphabet Squadron, you know that that's about a group of misfit pilots coming together to work for the nascent New Republic in the days just after the Battle of Endor, and facing down an elite squad of TIE fighter pilots. This story continues that amazing trilogy with those amazing characters. And just to give you a barest of extra insight into kind of how we make these books, one of the things we do is when an outline for a new book comes in, the team at Del Rey, we all sit down, we read the outline, and then we have a little conversation about, what's working, what do we still want to hone, what are our key points. We basically tell the story of the outline to each other. So one person sort of says, all right, this is what happens, this is what happens. And in talking it out, you can get that feel for where are the inflection points of a story, where, we might need a little more detail about this as we head towards the full book. And when we finished the outline for this book, someone turned to the rest of the group and said, is it really going to be a thing that the first Alphabet Squadron is going to be the happy one in the trilogy? And if you've read the first Alphabet Squadron, that's not the most happy one. But it's really great. Alexander Freed just has an amazing ability to write these great characters and to really dive into what it's like to be a pilot in Star Wars. So look out for that in June. Next is just something that maybe you heard about. This rumored, long-awaited Project Luminous was revealed earlier this week in a big, amazing presentation, which if you happen to miss, you just head over to StarWars.com. It's all over the front page. There's an amazing 5-minute video. There's all sorts of articles and interviews. You can get all caught up in the announcement. But Project Luminous is actually the High Republic, this brand new era for Star Wars stories, which is going to kick off in August with Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule, who up to this point has been doing absolutely phenomenal work in the comic space for Star Wars. He's an amazing person to work with. It's really exciting. And so our first entry into the High Republic, in the beginning of the High Republic, will be in August, which is exciting. And if you're here at C2E2 and you stop by booth 621, we have posters of the awesome book cover that we scrambled to get ready for you. So down there after, and all through the weekend we'll have some posters every single day. So that starts in August. There's obviously a ton of other High Republic books that are going to be coming out. After that, there's a few more later in the summer, and then I believe into the fall this year, there's a few more of the titles that were announced earlier this year. And then after that, we have another Thrawn book as Timzon starts a new trilogy for Thrawn, with Thrawn Ascendancy, the Ascendancy trilogy, and Chaos Rising is the first book. We are headed to the Chiss Ascendancy. We are going all the way into the unknown regions. We are going to be beyond a galaxy far, far away in some respects. And we are going to learn a lot more about where Thrawn is from, how he fits in there, what was going on for Thrawn before he showed up in the Empire, and all the stories that we all know from Hidden Rebels and beyond. So that comes out in October, and you may notice this tiny little mock-up book that is in the bottom right of this screen. You may have known this was originally supposed to be a May book. Due to some scheduling changes, we had to move it out to October, which we know is a lot of extra time to wait, which is a bit of a bummer. So we were like, well, we have to wait extra time for it anyway. So is there something special we could do with this book? So this mock-up, which shows the book with some very cool blue painted edges, is just one of the things that we may be exploring to try to make this book special. So that's not final by any means, but we wanted to let everyone know that we know waiting a little extra time is a bit of a bummer, so we're going to try to do some different and interesting things with the actual physical book if we can, which is super fun. And Tim is actually already working on the second book. He already threw the outline. We're off and running. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. But as I said, what we are imminently about to have in front of us and what we're here to talk about today is The Rise of Skywalker novelization by Rae Carson. So we're going to chat about it. And now I'm going to sit because it's way more comfortable just sit and chat. Especially when it's only like one person.
John's up.
Hi, Rae. Okay, there we go. See, I just want to point out, this is the point at which like the 200 to 300 slide CAD presentation would have.
It was going to be
Just
amazing.
one, everyone. Okay. All right, so we're going to start at the beginning of this whole process. So when you first found out, when you first got the offer and your wonderful agent came to you and said, hey, they want you to write the novelization for The Rise of Skywalker. Would you like to do it? What did that feel like? What was your first thoughts? What did you do? Because I actually don't even know the answer to this.
I had a little freak out, I don't mind saying. I had to bring my husband over to read and reread this email that I just gotten because I was so afraid I had misread it. That I was reading it through wish fulfillment and that the actual facts before me were completely different. Yeah, so I probably read that email 50 times and I kept going back to it thinking, I've made a mistake. They're asking me to do a tie-in for something. I don't know. I could go on forever about all the strange things I tried to justify this not happening to me in my head. But then pretty quick after that, I moved into strategy mode. I've been an author a long enough time to know that different types of art, even within the realm of writing, require different skill sets. And I had never done a novelization before. So I immediately started thinking about, how would that be different for me? How would I leverage what I knew into what I didn't know? And I got in touch with some people who were more experienced than I was, talked to Jason Fry a little bit, who wrote a really wonderful novelization for The Last Jedi, that kind of thing. The interesting thing was that I had my stepsons over visiting for a month, and I couldn't talk any details to them. But they're smart boys, they're in their 20s, and they knew something was up with their stepmom. And finally, towards the end, as they were leaving, I was able to tell them, yes, I got this gig. And they have been Star Wars fans since they were itty bitty. Like, I spent hours when they were 5 and 7 playing Lego Star Wars with them, So it was kind of like a family moment for all of us, and that was really fun. I'm still not over it. I'm pinching myself. Yeah, whatever. Like people are like, you wrote the Rise of Skywalker? No, that's somebody else.
It's really real.
It's
This is a real
This
book.
is the first day I've seen it. It's very exciting. I had to like kind of cuddle with it a little bit.
This book is quite literally off the presses, like from the book manufacturer shipped right here. That's how,
Wow.
because of the schedule in order to get it here. So no one really has seen it. You talked about how sort of important this was for you. Had writing a novelization ever been a goal for you as a writer?
Oh God, no. I had no idea. Anyways, keep going.
That's all
I'm
right.
done.
That's okay, that's all right.
I'm so eager to say no.
How much experience had you had reading novelizations, or
good
like how much
question.
had novelizations been part of, not just for Star Wars or other properties, that you had
Yeah.
consumed novelizations or can remember, novelizations that stuck out to you at the time?
That's a really good question. First part, no. It was not even a goal of mine. It was so beyond the scope of what my ambition was. It was a complete surprise. Having said that, the first novelization I ever read was Return of the Jedi. I read that when I was 10 years old, and I read it because there was a time in my life when I lived in pretty abject poverty, and I could not afford to go to the movies. And the book came out. This was in the day when the books came out a little bit before the movies, right? And I knew that we weren't going to go to the movies, and I knew my family couldn't afford to take us. So I begged my mom to get a copy from the library. And I was a huge Star Wars fan, huge. It was Princess Leia for Halloween like 3 years running, because when you're poor, you can make a Princess Leia costume out of an old bed sheet, right? And I had long hair, I could do cool things with my hair. So yeah, I was completely obsessed, needed to know how the story ended, begged my mom, she got it for me at the library, I read it through 3 times in a row. I just loved it. And to this day, it remains my favorite novelization. And I make no claim that that's an unbiased view, because it means so much to me, that book does. But I just feel like the writing is so smooth and the pacing is great, and I loved it. And eventually my aunt took pity on me and did take me to go see it, so I did get to see it in its original theatrical run. But man, if you told that little girl, I'm gonna start crying. I'm not. I'm strong. I'm strong, of course. I'm not gonna cry. If you told that little girl that she would write her own novelization, she would not believe you. There's just no way. Since then, of course, I've read all of them. I also really like novelizations that finish off like TV series that end too soon, So I was really into Dark Angel when that was out, and then Max Allan Collins did the final novelizations for those to sum up the story that had to end too soon. So I always liked those, but yeah, no, never expected it. That's a long way of saying no, never expected it. Not on my radar.
Well, I will share that. So writing a novelization, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in a minute or two. So writing a novelization is very different than if you get asked to write a Star Wars book in general, because there's all sorts of factors, like I said, we're going to get into in a second. And so the number of people who are like within the pool of potential writers who could write a novelization is actually a pretty small box. One of the criteria is probably that you need to probably have written at least something Star Wars before novelization. Probably, it would be a big surprise, I think, if anyone ever wrote their first Star Wars thing as a novelization. Though, if I remember correctly, I don't think it's entirely,
name authors.
yes, it's not entirely uncommon.
Yeah.
And I think as time has gone on and everything about writing books and everything else has changed, I think it's easier.
Nowadays,
yes,
yeah.
but I will tell you that very soon after we finished the novelization for episode 8, because it's not like we didn't know the episode novelization, but the novelization for episode 9 was coming, I wrote down the list, and your name was the first name I wrote.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't
And
know that.
it only was
That's
like
so cool.
75% because your name is Rae, and then Britt's name is done. So it's only like
Right.
no.
There's a little bit of faith in me
Yes.
in that equation.
No, it's because we worked together on Cantabite and from a certain point of view, and this one of it was like, oh, it's definitely Rae. This is the easiest decision I've ever made, which is great, because it's not always the easiest.
That's cool. I never knew that.
All right, so writing a novelization is really different than writing a normal Star Wars book. So let's talk about some of the fun steps along the way. So first of all, there's well, we talk about what sort of differences now that, because you've now written sort of on both sides of, what are the differences that stand out to you as this is a whole different world?
Yeah, first thing I had to go do was go to Lucasfilm and read the script. I had read the script for Solo to write Most Wanted, but this felt different because, I mean, it was the Rise of Skywalker, right? And I couldn't believe I was reading the script and learning how the story ends before everyone else. And I had to sit with that for a long time and not tell anybody anything. And that, I have to tell you, was really strange, just to have this weight of lore that I couldn't talk about, except with Tom. We spent a lot of time on the phone. So that's one thing. It just felt different. I felt the weight of it for sure. But an adaptation is, I'm thinking, I'm such a strategist, and this is going to come out when I talk, I'm sorry. I'm like half Slytherin, half Ravenclaw, so you're going to know that for sure by the end of this panel. Yeah, no, I'm such a strategist, so I'm constantly thinking about, you know, film media versus book media and how they're different, and ways to internalize the conflict that's going to be on the screen. And what can I do that's going to be different from the film, but also fulfill the film? Because I'm not going to write a different story. It has to be the story I'm contracted to write. So all of that was going on in my head. But the really fun thing was, we knew that, like The Last Jedi, this was going to be an expanded edition. So I got to come up with some extra stuff to put in it that wasn't in the script at all. And so part of my job right away was, after reading the script, was to come up with a list of potential expanded or additional scenes that we could put in the book. And then Tom and I got together and talked about them and sent them off to Lucasfilm. And can I talk about one of them, maybe? Or is that going to be later?
It'll come up a little later. I think I know what you're trying to talk about. I think it'll come up in a minute. Yeah,
so there are some things in there, you'll see them right away. They'll pop up at you as you read and go, wow, that was in the movie. So that was really fun. And yeah, I feel like I'm going to be proud of that forever. You know, I did that, I wrote that.
So what was it like? What was the process like in terms of actually the work of writing compared to when you get to write on one of your original novels or other sources? In terms of, I don't know, schedule, what else you happen to do.
Let's talk about this.
A little bit. I mean, you can imagine a novelization is written in a pretty tight window. Because obviously you're writing, you know, as much as you start writing eventually, you have to make sure that, you know, you are matching up with the film. Because again, we are writing the novelization of the film, not an original story. And so we have to turn things around pretty quickly, which
fast.
you told me one story about, there were a number of events going on in your life, but one story about your dear husband basically having to do all of the grocery and other related life work events,
I have a
obligations.
really good life partner. And there were times when I don't think my butt left the chair for like 8 to 12 hours a day. And so I sent my husband to do literally everything. Grocery shopping, take the cat to the vet, do this, do that. He was so supportive. He was so good about it. It is definitely different. When I write my own property so far just for HarperCollins, I'm generally writing 750 to 1,000 words a day. That's 3 to 4 manuscript type pages, double spaced per day. And I like to take my time. I think my own voice when I'm writing my own properties is right on that edge of commercial and literary. My agent calls it high commercial or something like that. I don't know. It's fancy for fancy. But Star Wars is not like that. Star Wars is action-packed, it's fast-paced, and it's not my property, and we're under tighter deadlines. And so a way more typical day for me writing Star Wars is 3,000 to 4,000 words. So that's 15 to 20 typed pages today, and they're per day. And there are times when my fingers hurt because that's just physically a lot of typing. So like the E key on my keyboard started to wear off.
Yeah, why the E? I mean, like I could kind of guess because there's like
Rae.
So it's like, why is this specific?
I don't know. Yeah, most common letter in the English language, I think, yeah. So, yeah, but if you're ever gonna write Star Wars, I highly recommend having a good life partner who will do nice things for you. Or back rubs. I was like, you know, I'm doing a really important book right now. I could really use a neck rub. Yeah, he was good about that.
That's good. So, we'll get to this because you had mentioned it before. So one of the great things about the novelizations, and obviously the process is a little bit different, it's a little bit more hectic, though the nice thing is like you don't have to do anything sort of like an outline, because it's like, well, the movie's the outline.
Right, the script is your outline.
Yeah, that's pretty, that helps us save time. But one of the great things is that we do get to work with all of our friends, the people at Lucasfilm, to add additional content to the book, material that we don't see in the film, or that takes a scene that's already there and extends it, or we get to look at it maybe from the perspective of a different character, or with just a level of interiority that, you know, when you go to a movie, it doesn't, unless you've got like heavy narration to a movie, you don't have. So is there, you know, one of the particular scenes or elements that you were really excited that you got to expand up on or add in there?
Definitely, yeah. A couple. One that stands out to me is I got to write more about Zori. I got to imagine a backstory for her and give and build her world a little bit. So you get to see her crew and her headquarters and a little bit more of her existence on Kijimi. So that was really fun. She was brand new to the Star Wars universe, so there wasn't this weight of expectation and lore, and I was just free to create. So that was really fun. And then another thing I'm really proud of is I felt strongly with the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher that I wanted more Leia. I wanted more Leia in this book, more than the filmmakers could do, because of course they couldn't, even though they would have loved to. So, so I did write more Leia, and I got a lot of support from the team for that. So that was really cool too. You'll see that if you read the book.
Yes, this is very cool. All the extra super great. There's a lot of like emotional editing going on, like having to read something like 4 or 5 times before I could bring myself to generate words.
There are a couple of scenes, I'll just tell you straight up, a couple of scenes I like cried through 3 times, and I'm still not over them. So, yeah.
Also, just to pull it back to cats for a minute, because we're still going to get some cat conversation in here, even though we are. Is one of the things, because my job as an editor, since I can't actually write, I'm not writing books for Rae, which is good because I'm not a writer, Rae is a writer. But one of your jobs as an editor is to like be there for emotional support, existential support, you know, if they need anything. But so the other thing is just be like, you can totally do this. Like I know that totally looks like it's not enough time to write. We can totally do this. We're gonna do this. So every time she would send me
Tom,
anything.
you were amazing. I have to say this publicly. He's a good editor, full stop. He's really smart about writing and about story structure and storytelling, but he's also a good person. And he was a tremendous encouragement and support to me throughout this process.
So really, I would just send her photos of my cats, who are the Del Rey official interns. Whenever she would send something, it was a bit of boosts, you know, a bit of an encouragement.
I mean, a cat named Lando in a cape. Of course, that's going to brighten your day.
Yes, I have a cat named Lando. He does have a cape. So he sits with me to read and edit books. So he is also a good partner to have through all of that. So you mentioned you got to write, you know, a lot more for Zori, and it was clear that she was one of the I think favorites that you got to write. Who were some of the other characters that you really enjoyed getting to write about, either just in the context of writing the novelization, or because you got to add more to them, or any other reason that happens?
I love writing Finn. Finn is okay. We talked, you know, Harry Potter house. I'm going to say something super controversial. Are you ready? Can we handle it? I think he's a Hufflepuff. He's so kind, he's so good, he's so earnest, he is so loyal to his friends, and it is a joy to write him. And it was especially fun because John Boyega's comic timing is just chef's kiss. He's such a good actor. So it was really fun to write Finn with that in mind, and just keeping John Boyega in mind and his mannerisms and the way he interprets scenes. So that was really fun. And then, of course, Rae. Rae is awesome. She's been awesome since she first appeared on the screen in The Force Awakens, and I made a career for myself writing kick-butt female protags, so it was very comfortable and natural to get inside of her head and give some interiority to those scenes. I loved being able to get inside of her head. It's quite a journey that she's on, and I can't believe I got to write it. That's just so cool. I'm probably gonna say that a lot. I apologize.
It's really the answer to every.
Yeah.
It's just so cool. Yeah, right. All the fun stuff that we have to add to the story is just it's great, and all of it just comes from watching John on screen.
Yeah.
So. I actually don't know what your answer to this is, but do you have, so, you know, unless the big stuff, there's all sorts of small details, Easter eggs, little things that we just put into the book. We just pepper the entire book throughout, from other Star Wars stories, from everything we get our hands on, everything we have conversations about. So do you have a favorite detail or like Easter egg that you're like really proud of? You're like, I nailed this.
Yes.
Will you tell them?
No.
Will you tell them where it is? Don't say in the book. You can also say.
There are a couple I'm really proud of. One comes near the end, kind of before the final showdown. I had an idea for something that we could do that would be a tribute to some Star Wars stuff that had come before. Some of it recognizable by a lot of people, some of it recognizable by people who were more into the books. And what was really, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, you have to read the book to find out. But what was really cool about it is I had this idea and I pitched it, and everyone jumped on with ideas on how we could do it and exactly what we should include. And it was really funny. It was really fun. It was this creative, collaborative thing that happened that was really cool. So, so that's one that you can keep an eye out for. Yeah, I think I'm not going to tell you this.
Okay. So I will give you a couple, because I have some favorites. So one, I'm just going to give you a clue to it. You're going to have to suss out what it is, but it has to do with the color green.
Yeah.
It has to do with the color green. Now it's not like, well, there's like green everywhere. It's like, what do you mean by color green? Don't worry. It's just the color green. Just pay attention to it. She wrote a couple of lines related to the color green that I thought were just like the most pitch perfect thing I've ever seen, and I really love that. Second is a particular line of dialogue that Chewie has. That is at a particular scene where, let's just say, things are not going great for everybody. And if you watch the movie, you do know what everyone else is saying in the scene, but obviously because they don't translate what Chewie is saying, you're not really sure exactly what Chewie is saying in that moment, but it might be the most perfect Chewie line. And when, so, you know, obviously when we're doing these books and we're getting comments and getting feedback from all the different folks who are involved in our editorial process, you end up with this Word document that's just like full of comments, and it's got, you know, corrections, and it's got comments and things like that. And this particular line from Chewie got just every single person, just unanimously, just people cracking up. The funniest thing. So it's one of the funniest lines. So it's definitely.
Don't worry, we've oversold it.
No. I will not accept any criticism about that. So Chewie. And also there's a couple scenes with Chewie that we're not going to spoil. That Chewie gets some extra play in the novelization with some characters that I think that everyone will enjoy. So yes.
Yeah, I'll just add to your last question about that. That was another thing. Chewie and Lando. Spoiler for all two people in here who may not have seen the movie yet, are kind of the last of the old guard at the end of the movie, so I wanted to give each of them an extra moment or two.
Yeah. It felt very right to acknowledge that though they make it through, they are ultimately the two who will carry the weight of everyone who's gone, probably more than anyone else, just because of how much time they spent with them. It's nice. Oh, and one more. I'll give you one more. So obviously there's the great scene where all of the ships show up. Like all of the ships show up. And this is one of my favorite Easter eggs because it was something that at the very end of this whole process, one of the last things we did was Rae and I were on the phone basically walking through every last correction to make sure they were done, because we basically had to get the book done so it could be printed, so today. And so we were walking through every last little thing, just dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's on the phone together, and we got to this line, and we had this idea for making one last tweak to a line of dialogue to echo, and the hint and the clue that I will give you all, to echo a very specific line of dialogue from the first Star Wars movie. And we came up with this thing that we thought was really indicative and really brought everything full circle, but it took us about 5 minutes to crack it, but we did it sort of together.
And get it in the right place.
Yes, and to put it in the right place in the scene. And we basically did it live over the phone. So it was like live sort of editing, collaboration over the phone. I'm super proud of it. So you'll have to wait for that. And I guess it bears mentioning too that because there are so many ships, you can imagine that there are lots of people on those ships. And while obviously the novelization is not just pages of 10,000, plus ships just radioing in, identifying themselves, you do get the identity of at least a few more people who are in some of those ships. So look for that. So that's all the history. All right. So this is one of the cool things about novelizations. This is actually simultaneously makes what makes them a little challenging, but ultimately I think it's one of the coolest opportunities. Is that whatever you write down on the page, and whatever you take from the script, whatever you take from stills of concept art, whatever, and flesh out on the page, eventually you have to reconcile with a finished, full, acted film. So what'll end up happening is you have to go back through scenes and either reconstitute them or adjust them based on what actually ends up on the screen. And Jason Fry, who, as Rae mentioned, wrote the novelization for last year, has a really great anecdote where he talked about, he went back and rewrote the entire Rae in the rain on Octu scene, because as he had originally wrote it, was way different than when he watched the movie and he saw the absolute joy on Rae, on Daisy's face when she sees rain. If not exactly for the first time, probably for the first time. And so he had to go completely reimagine that scene because that's not how he had thought of it. So is there something that when you saw The Rise of Skywalker, you were like, oh my gosh, I gotta go back, I gotta completely redo this because this isn't at all how I had envisioned it, or the person who was acting in the scene or whatever is, did something that was unexpected?
Yeah, definitely. What I knew I did not want to do, because earlier I was talking about how you make a book that's the same as the film but also different, and how they're different art forms. So one thing I knew I didn't want to do was like recreate every single lightsaber battle blow for blow, that kind of a thing. I thought that was slow. In the book, on the screen that looks amazing, but in the book just slows the pacing to a crawl. But I also had like the opposite experience because there's this scene in the movie, and you've all seen it if you've even seen the trailer. It's near the end, near the final showdown on Exegol, and Rae just stands there a moment holding her lightsaber, and the light is reflected on her face, and you can even kind of see it in her pupil. It's reflected in her eye, and we